My name is Clara Finch, and at 65 years of age, I am a widow living alone in the quiet, lakeside city of Havenwood, Michigan. The air here smells of damp earth and water, a scent I've known my whole life. Last night, under the pale glow of my kitchen light, I instructed my bank to cancel a cashier's check for $50,000. It was the final payment for my only son's wedding, a wedding I was unceremoniously barred from attending just hours after he threw me out of the rehearsal dinner for embarrassing him in front of his new, impeccably pedigreed in-laws. My hands were still trembling this morning as I brewed my coffee, the porcelain cup rattling softly against its saucer. 40 years. 40 years of dusting flour from my clothes, of rising before the sun, of kneading my love and sacrifice into every loaf of bread I sold to provide for him. And this was my return on that investment. The worn wood of my kitchen table felt solid and real beneath my forearms, a stark contrast to the hollow space that had opened up in my chest. Nothing like the warmth of his small body curled against mine as a child, smelling of milk and sleep. When did that boy, who believed my sourdough starter was a magical potion, become a man so ashamed of its baker? It began, I suppose, long before the rehearsal dinner, but the unraveling started in earnest 48 hours ago. I was standing in my sunlit bedroom, holding the deep teal dress I'd had specially made. It was elegant but understated, crafted from a soft wool crepe that fell in a way I hoped would look timeless, not cheap. The dress cost more than my entire wardrobe combined, a quiet indulgence for what I believed would be one of the proudest days of my life. My son, Ethan, was getting married. My phone chimed from the antique vanity where my late husband Robert's picture still sat. A text from Ethan. "Mom, can we talk? Something's come up about the wedding." My heart did a slow, nervous tumble. After a year of meticulous planning, of checks written and vendors booked, what could possibly have come up now? I called him. The video connected, and their faces filled the small screen. Ethan and Sophia, seated on a sterile white sofa in their minimalist apartment overlooking the lake. I was always afraid to sit on that sofa, afraid my life might somehow leave a mark on its pristine surface. "Mom," Ethan began, and I saw the telltale flicker in his eyes, the one he'd had since he was a boy trying to explain a broken vase. Sophia's hand, adorned with the diamond I'd helped him buy, rested possessively on his thigh. "We need to talk about this weekend." "What is it, sweetheart?" I asked, my voice softer than the tremor I felt inside. A mother's intuition is a strange and heavy thing. It knows the shape of a wound before the blow has even landed. Sophia leaned into the frame, her smile as perfectly constructed as the rest of her. "Clara," she began, "never, Mom, you understand that this wedding is, well, it's a significant event for my family. My father's business partners, influential people from the city, they'll all be there." "I understand," I said, though I didn't, not really. I understood guest lists and catering counts, but the currency of influence was a language I'd never learned. Ethan took over, his words rushing to fill the space. "So, we were thinking, perhaps it's best not to mention the bakery. You can just say you're a small business owner. Or retired. The bakery. The daily need. The business I built with my own two hands after Robert passed away, the one whose warm, yeasty breath had paid for our mortgage, for Ethan's clothes, for his university education. The bakery that was, in large part, funding this very wedding. And," Sophia added, her tone as smooth as fondant, "we've had to make a slight adjustment to the seating plan. We've put you at table 19. It's a lovely, intimate table near the back terrace. Table 19. I'd seen the draft of the seating chart. It was tucked in a corner, screened by a large potted ficus, next to the swinging doors of the kitchen. Sophia's parents, the formidable Prestons, and their circle of influence, occupied tables 1 through 5, front and center. "Actually," Ethan said, his gaze dropping to his lap, "Sophia and I were talking. The reception, it might be a lot for you. All those people. Maybe it would be better if you just came for the ceremony and then headed home to rest." Overwhelming. The word hung in the air between us. Me, the woman who had woken at 4 a.m. for 3 decades, who had wrestled 50-pound sacks of flour, who had balanced ledgers and payrolls and a grieving boy's heart all at once. I would be overwhelmed by a party. I see, I managed, my voice a thin, brittle thing. The crack in my heart widened. You get it, right, Mom? He pleaded, his face a mask of strained sincerity. It's just for one day. It's so important to get this right. One day. As if the 14,600 days I had spent raising him, loving him, and providing for him were merely a prelude to this single, defining performance where my role was to be minimized, then erased. After we hung up, I sat on the edge of my bed, the teal dress draped over a chair, its vibrant color mocking the sudden grayness of my world. How had I not seen this coming? How many quiet dismissals had I excused as him being busy? How many times had I smoothed over Sophia's casual condescension with the thought that she was just different? I remembered the time Ethan asked me not to bring my famous apple cinnamon loaves to a dinner at the Prestons. They have a caterer, Mom. It's just a different standard. I remembered how Sophia had forgotten to invite me to her bridal shower, explaining later that it was just a silly thing with her girlfriends. The phone calls that grew shorter, the visits that became obligations to be squeezed between their far more important social engagements. Each memory was a small, sharp stone, and I was only now realizing I had been walking on them for years, telling myself the pain was normal. In the clear, unforgiving light of hindsight, the pattern was as stark as a winter tree against the snow. The closer they got to the wedding, the more they pushed me into the shadows. But even then, sitting in my quiet house with the weight of their shame pressing down on me, I couldn't have imagined what would happen at the rehearsal dinner. I couldn't have fathomed that my son, my Ethan, the little boy who used to leave me drawings tucked into the flower bins, would do something that would shatter our shared history into pieces too fine to ever reassemble. The sun was setting over the lake, casting long, mournful shadows across my lawn. Tomorrow was supposed to be the happiest day of Ethan's life. I just hadn't understood that my absence was a prerequisite for his joy. In 1983, when Ethan was just a baby, Robert was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. I was 28, a part-time art student with dreams of painting landscapes as vast and moody as Lake Michigan. Robert was a history teacher, a gentle man with a mind full of stories and a laugh that could warm a room. His diagnosis was a slow, cruel thief. First it took his ability to walk without a cane, then his job, then, piece by piece, the man I had married. We lived on his disability payments and my meager earnings from a part-time library job. It wasn't enough. The medical bills piled up like snowdrifts in our hallway. I started baking from our small kitchen, selling bread and pies to neighbors. What began as a way to make ends meet became a lifeline. The rhythmic, meditative work of kneading dough was a comfort, a way to channel my fear and grief into something that could nourish. When Ethan was 7 and Robert needed a wheelchair and round-the-clock care, I used the last of our savings to lease a small, neglected storefront downtown. The daily need was born. I'd work from 4 a.m. until Ethan's school bus came, then rush home to be with Robert, then go back to the bakery in the afternoon while a home health aide was there. Ethan would do his homework in the back room, the air thick with the scent of yeast and sugar. "Mom, your hands are all white," he'd say, tracing the flower lines on my skin. "That's the magic, honey," I'd tell him. "This is what builds our life." My art supplies gathered dust in the attic. My dreams of painting were packed away with them. There was no time for anything but work, Robert, and Ethan. When Robert passed away just after Ethan's high school graduation, the life insurance policy was modest, but it felt like a fortune. It was meant to be my security, my chance to finally rest. Instead, it became Ethan's launchpad. University tuition, a reliable car, a deposit for his first apartment. "You're all I have, Mom," he'd wept at the funeral, his lanky frame shaking in my arms. "We're a team." "Always, sweetheart," I'd whispered back. "You and me." Every decision, every sacrifice, every deferred dream had been for him. For the life he would build. I never once imagined it would be a life from which I would be so thoroughly excluded. He met Sophia 3 years ago at a fundraiser for the local art museum, a world I had once dreamed of inhabiting, but now only observed from the outside. He was working in marketing then, a field that seemed to value image above all else. He brought her to the bakery to meet me, a choice I later realized was a test. She was elegant, poised, her cashmere coat unblemished by the flowery air. She surveyed my little shop, with its worn wooden floors and mismatched chairs, with the polite curiosity of an anthropologist studying a primitive tribe. "So you bake," she said, the word hanging in the air as if it were a charming but slightly embarrassing hobby. "It's more than that." Ethan jumped in, a faint blush on his cheeks. "Mom built this place from nothing. She has commercial contracts, supplies half the restaurants in town." He was defending me, but it sounded like an apology. Sophia smiled that cool, remote smile. "How wonderful that you have something to keep you busy." There was a moment, though, that gave me a flicker of hope. Her phone rang, and the screen flashed "Father." Her posture instantly changed. She became tense, her voice deferential. "Yes, Father. Of course, Father." When she hung up, her polished mask had a tiny crack in it. "Sorry," she murmured. "My parents are very involved." "That can be a heavy weight to carry," I said gently, recognizing the pressure even if its source was different from my own. For a split second, she looked at me with something raw and real in her eyes. "You have no idea. Perhaps that's why I tried so hard for so long. I saw a girl trapped in a gilded cage and thought my son was the one who could help her find the key. I never imagined he would simply lock himself inside with her and throw the key away." The wedding planning began, and so did the financial bleed. It started subtly. "Mom, the Prestons think it's only fair we contribute to the engagement party since they're hosting at their yacht club. A check for $10,000. At the party, a lavish affair with an oyster bar and a string quartet, I felt like a visitor from another planet. Ethan pulled me aside. "Mom, would you mind not mentioning you helped pay? Mr. Preston is very proud of his generosity." I smiled and nodded, a small piece of my heart chipping away. Then came the bigger asks. "The venue deposit, $40,000. We'll pay you back from the wedding gifts, Mom, I promise. Sophia's couture gown, $20,000. A girl only gets one wedding dress, you know. The planner, the caterer, the florist." Each request was wrapped in the language of love and necessity. Each check I wrote a testament to my own complicity in my erasure. I watched the account that held Robert's life insurance, the money meant for my own quiet, comfortable old age, dwindle away. I had given Ethan nearly $250,000. One evening, I tried to broach the subject. He'd come to pick up another check, this one for artisan ice sculptures. "Ethan, honey, this is becoming more than I can sustain. I'm dipping into my retirement savings now." His face hardened. "Are you saying you don't want to help? Do you have any idea what Sophia's sister's wedding cost? Over $1 million. I'm trying to give your son a good start, and you're complaining about ice sculptures." "I'm not complaining, I just—" "Dad's life insurance was more than this, wasn't it?" he asked quietly, his eyes cold. "You're not exactly poor, Mom." That was the moment. The moment I understood he wasn't just accepting my help, he was tallying my worth, calculating his inheritance, viewing my love as his entitlement. My son, my gentle, kind-hearted boy, had become a stranger who saw me as a bank. But I still wrote the check. Because what else does a mother do? The morning of the rehearsal dinner, I felt a fragile sense of hope. Maybe the phone call had been a momentary panic. Maybe when they saw me, dressed elegantly, smiling, they would remember I was family. My niece Lily, my late sister's daughter, stopped by as I was getting ready. At 19, she possessed a fierce, uncomplicated clarity I envied. She'd spent summers working in the bakery and saw me not as a function, but as a person. "Aunt Clara, you look beautiful," she said, admiring the teal dress. Then her eyes fell on the folder of receipts on my desk. "You're paying for all this, aren't you?" "It's what you do for your kids," I said, the words tasting like ash. She hesitated. I heard something last week. I was dropping a book off at Ethan's, and they didn't know I was in the hall. Sophia was on the phone with her mother. Lily bit her lip. She said after the wedding, they could finally manage the mother situation, and that this would be the last big financial pull they'd need from you. Manage the mother situation. I was a situation. A problem to be handled. A resource to be tapped and then capped. Lily's words were the final, steady drops of water that cracked the stone. At the rehearsal dinner, held at a ridiculously expensive restaurant with panoramic lake views, I was seated at the far end of the long table, next to a distant cousin of Sophia's who was engrossed in his phone. Ethan and Sophia were at the center, laughing with Mr. and Mrs. Preston. I felt invisible. During the toasts, Mr. Preston stood, glass raised. To my daughter and my new son, Ethan. A young man with incredible potential, whom we are thrilled to welcome into our family. He never mentioned me. It was as if Ethan had sprung fully formed into their world. Later, I tried to join a conversation Ethan was having with one of Sophia's uncles. I made a lighthearted comment about a funny story from Ethan's childhood. A hush fell over the small group. Ethan's smile froze. He took my elbow and steered me away. "Mom, what are you doing?" he hissed, his voice low and furious. "We talked about this. No embarrassing stories. These are important people." "It wasn't embarrassing, Ethan. It was a sweet story about you and your father." "It's not the right crowd for it," he snapped. "Can't you just be quiet and smile? Is that so hard?" That's when Sophia glided over, her face a mask of concern. "Clara, are you all right? You seem a little lost." She turned to Ethan. "Darling, maybe your mother is tired. It's been a long day for her." "I'm not tired," I said, my voice shaking with a rage I hadn't felt in years. "I'm his mother. I have a right to speak at his rehearsal dinner." "And you're making a scene," Sophia said, her voice dropping to an icy whisper. "My father is watching. You are embarrassing us." "Embarrassing you?" The words finally broke free. "I paid for this dinner. I paid for the rings on your fingers. I paid for the roof over your heads. The only thing embarrassing here is your monumental ingratitude." The silence that followed was absolute. Ethan's face was pale, his mouth a thin, hard line. "That's it," he said, his voice void of all warmth. "You need to leave." "What?" "Get out. Go home. You're not welcome here anymore tonight." He looked at me, his eyes as cold and distant as a winter star. "And don't bother coming to the ceremony tomorrow. You've done enough damage." He turned his back on me and walked away, Sophia on his arm. I stood there, rooted to the spot, the sound of polite laughter and clinking glasses washing over me. No one came to my side. No one met my eye. I had been excised. I don't remember the drive home. I only remember standing in my kitchen, the teal dress feeling like a costume for a play in which my part had been cut. I opened my laptop and looked at my bank account. The final $50,000 payment to the venue was scheduled to go through in the morning. I picked up the phone. My hands were perfectly steady. When the 24-hour banking representative answered, my voice was clear and calm. "I need to place a stop payment on a cashier's check. 15 minutes. That's all it took to dismantle the foundation of their perfect, curated day. When I hung up, I felt a profound and terrifying sense of peace. The backbone I had loaned out for 40 years had finally been returned to me. I wasn't done. I called my lawyer, an old friend named Helen. "I need to set up an educational trust," I told her. By 7 a.m., I had moved the bulk of my remaining savings, the money that would have been my final gift to Ethan, into an irrevocable trust for Lily. She was the one who saw me, the one who deserved the investment in her future. The call started at 7:15 a.m., just as I was applying a touch of lipstick, a small act of defiance. Ethan. His name flashed on my phone again and again. I let it go to voicemail. Then Sophia. Then a number I didn't recognize. I finally answered. It was Ethan, his voice a frantic squawk. "Mom, the venue just called. The check was refused." "What did you do?" "I canceled it, Ethan," I said, fastening the simple pearl earrings Robert had given me. "You what?" "The wedding is in 4 hours. You're ruining everything." I could hear Sophia shrieking in the background. "I told you she was unstable. I told you she'd do this." "No, Ethan. You ruined everything when you threw your mother out of your life because she wasn't good enough for your new family. If you don't fix this right now," he said, his voice dropping to a cold threat, "you will never, ever see me again. Or your grandchildren. You'll die alone in that dusty old bakery." The threat was meant to shatter me. Instead, it set me free. "A son who would use his own future children as a weapon isn't a son I need to see," I said quietly. and I would rather die alone and respected in my bakery than live a single day longer as your shame." I hung up. For the first time in his life, I had the last word. I didn't go to the wedding venue. Instead, I drove to the bakery. I turned on the lights, the ovens, and the old radio that only played classic rock. I pulled on my apron, the familiar way to comfort. And I began to bake. I measured flour, cracked eggs, and kneaded dough. My hands, which he found so embarrassing, moved with the muscle memory of 30 years of love and labor. I baked sourdough and challah, rye and brioche. I baked until every rack was full, until the entire street smelled of warm, honest, life-giving bread. I gave it all away. To my regular customers, to strangers walking by, to the mailman and the sanitation workers. It was a celebration. A declaration of independence. The aftermath, I heard in pieces from Lily. The Prestons, trapped by their own pride, paid the venue to avoid a public scandal. The wedding happened, a strained, joyless affair under a cloud of fury and humiliation. Ethan told everyone I'd had a nervous breakdown, that I was suffering from early-onset dementia. It was an easier story to tell than the truth. In the weeks that followed, I found my footing on this new, unmapped terrain. I hired a full-time manager for the bakery and started taking afternoons off. I unearthed my old art supplies from the attic. I signed up for a painting class at the community college. My first canvases were clumsy and amateurish, but they were mine. They were full of color and feeling, things I had suppressed for decades. I sold the big family house, with its rooms full of ghosts and memories, and bought a small, light-filled condo overlooking the lake. I painted the walls a cheerful yellow and filled the space with books and art and plants. I was building a life that fit me, not the role I had been playing. 6 months after the wedding that wasn't, my doorbell rang. It was Ethan. He looked thin, tired, the polished veneer stripped away. Behind him, looking equally worn, stood Sophia, holding a baby carrier. "Mom," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Can we come in?" I could have said no, but I stepped aside, curious to see the final act of this tragedy. "This is Robert," Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion as he lifted the baby from the carrier. "My grandson. Named for the man whose memory they had desecrated." The manipulation was so transparent it was pathetic. The baby was beautiful, and my arms ached to hold him. But I kept them at my sides. "We're struggling, Mom," Ethan began, launching into a rehearsed-sounding speech. "Sophia's parents have cut us off. My job, it's not enough. We need your help." "You need my money," I corrected, my voice gentle but firm. "And you brought this beautiful, innocent child here as leverage." The silence was my answer. "Let me tell you what I've learned these past 6 months, Ethan," I said, settling into the comfortable armchair I'd bought just for myself. "I've learned that love without respect is just a transaction. I've learned that my peace is not for sale. I am not your safety net anymore. You are adults. It's time you learn to fly on your own, or perhaps to fall and learn how to get back up." They left in a storm of resentful silence. As the door closed, I allowed myself a single, silent tear for the grandmother I would never be. But it was followed by a deep, cleansing breath of freedom. 5 years have passed. 5 years of painting, of traveling, of friendships, of quiet joy. I am 70 now, and I have never felt more alive. The bakery thrives under new ownership, a young couple who remind me of Robert and me, full of hope and flower dust. I am a silent partner, an occasional consultant, and their biggest fan. Lily is in her final year of medical school, her education secured. She is going to be a healer, and in a way, she has already healed me. I know, through Lily, that Ethan's life has not been easy. He and Sophia divorced. He works 2 jobs now, struggling to make ends meet. He is learning, the hard way, the lessons I tried to teach him with love instead of hardship. Last week, a letter arrived. His handwriting was hesitant, unfamiliar. "Dear Mom," it began. "I am writing this on Robert's 5th birthday. He asked about you. He wanted to know if he has a grandma who makes magic bread, a story I told him once." I didn't know how to answer. I've been in therapy. I'm learning about the person I became. I see it all now, the entitlement, the shame, the way I used your love as a currency. I turned your sacrifices into my expectations. I am making amends. That's what the therapist calls it. This is me, making amends to you, without any expectation of forgiveness. I was wrong. About everything. I was a weak man, ashamed of the strong woman who raised me. And I am so sorry. I tell Robert about you. I tell him his grandmother is an artist, a businesswoman, a survivor. I tell him she is brave and good. I tell him that her love was the truest thing in my life, and I threw it away. I don't expect a response. But I wanted you to know. I'm trying to be a man worthy of being your son. Ethan. I have read the letter a dozen times. It sits on my desk, next to a photo of my late husband and an invitation to my first solo art show at a small local gallery. Forgiveness is a complicated country, and I am not sure if I have a visa. But tomorrow, I will wake up and watch the sun rise over the lake. I will have coffee in my beautiful, peaceful home. I will go to my studio and I will paint. Maybe I will write him back. Maybe I won't. The choice, for the first time in a long time, is entirely my own.